Hey everyone, I'm Lily, and welcome to my limited set review for Ravnica Allegiance. There's a lot to get through, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the introduction, but in general, the set review is going to be focusing on limited, mostly draft, because that's the main format I play, for Ravnica Allegiance. And, I'll also talk about sealed, because I'm trying to get this out before pre-release, which is next weekend, which is going to be super exciting, super fun, and I still need to sign up. But, yeah. So, this video we're going to be talking about white and blue, not white-blue, like the Azorius cards. That'll be in a different video. We're talking about the mono-white cards and the mono-blue cards, in this episode. And, yeah. Like I said, I don't know if there's much else to say. I normally say, oh, if you haven't know how I'm doing this, watch the first video. But this is the first video, so I don't do that. Hi, I'm Lily, and I'm also rambling at this point, so let's just hop right into it. And we're just starting off with Angel of Grace, which is a 5-mana, 5/4 flash flying. When Angel of Grace enters the battlefield, until end of turn, damage that would reduce your life total less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. You may pay 6 mana, exile Angel of Grace from your graveyard, and your life total becomes 10. Okay, it is a 5/4 flash flying, and that's very good. Like, honestly, even if it wasn't flash, like a 5/4 flying is very good. It's also a mythic, so you're not going to see these super often. It's not something you probably need to play around, unless you know they have it. But honestly, that third line of text I don't think is super relevant on this card. Most of the time you're just better on flashing it in like the turn you're going to be doing it. Like maybe flash it in, eat something, or flash it end of turn, and all of a sudden you have 5 more points of power in the air that you don't expect. And when it dies, it does have the potential to give you some life later in the game, but honestly that third line isn't super relevant for limited, or any format really. Like, I think there could be situations where you flash it in and negate their like alpha strike or something like that, but at the same time, I don't really care. Like, it's a 5-mana 5/4 flyer, which is just a really good beater, and also having flash is just a benefit. Next up we have Angelic Exultation, which is a 4-mana enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So it kind of like it's it's similar to giving all your creatures exalted. Is it Sublime Archangel or something like that? There's an angel that does this effect, but essentially it isn't as good as that because it doesn't have a body. It doesn't count itself, but at the same time, like, if you're saying sort of like go wide strategy, which kind of like Orzhov is, especially if you have a bunch of afterlife cards, which like blow up into flyers, and you have like a lot of spirits, then you can start sending your spirits to have like potentially like pretty good hits. But even then, also like Azorius has some like pretty good evasive threats, which can become much bigger with Angelic Exultation, obviously. But you do need to have the right deck for this. You are spending a 4-mana enchantment that doesn't affect the board state. It is only good on the offensive. And I could see it being alright in those decks. But you don't want more than one, obviously. And you do kind of need that like go wide thing, where most of the time I think you're going to rather have just a 4-drop creature. And the 4-drop slot is a very contested slot in your deck. And yeah, I could see myself also proven wrong on this, because I could see this also being very good because, also at the same time, you also need evasive threats because of the number of, evasive creatures, or like small creatures, especially with Afterlife. There's gonna be lots of like spirit tokens running around and things like that, where it's not, especially in Orzhov decks, it can be easily chump blocked and things like that. I could see it easily being a high sideboard thing, unless you have sorts of evasions. You want that evasion on there. But yeah, I'm actually not sure on this card. It could be good, but at the same time, I just feel like oftentimes it is too big of a tempo hit. Next up we have Archway Angel. Archway Angel. I'm used to saying Arc when you're talking about an angel because you think Archangel, but no, this is actually Archway Angel, which is a 6 mana 3/4 flying, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life for each gate you control. Kind of the gates deck is actually a lot more pushed in this format, where we're kind of like the deck that just wants to get a bunch of gates and stuff like that is actually has a bit more support. It was a little bit in Guilds of Ravnica, but honestly it wasn't that great. But this one, it's a 6 mana 3/4 flyer, which is a little expensive for what I want, but honestly if I gain like 2 life, it becomes okay. Like with no gates, it's not great. But it's like passable. With 1 gate, it's alright, and anything more than that, then that becomes a pretty solid card there. Also just a 3/4 flyer. I feel like these kind of flyers with like more than 1 toughness will become very important with all the Orzhov spirit tokens running around, where kind of that having these things to help stem the bleeding from like just these constant willing away will be important. Next we have Arrestor's Zeal, which is a 1 mana instant. Target creature gets +2/+2, and this is our first addendum card. Addendum is a mechanic which is on instants, and if you cast an instant during your main phase, it gets an additional effect. So you lose some of the viability of it being, well, a main phase spell, or being an instant, but you get a little bit of extra. So this one gives you +2/+2, but if you cast it during your main phase, it also gives them flying. So it's a cheaper Mighty Leap that, actually I don't mind this at all, because like, obviously you can't use it to like ambush a flying creature like you can with Mighty Leap, but I mean, usually if you're using an instant speed to just kind of like, as a +2/+2 for 1 mana, which is, I mean, a solid rate. Like, it's not a giant growth, but for a white combat trick, that's pretty rate. But also just like sometimes you just use it to like punch through like a final blow or something, and it works there too. It's still a combat trick. Like, I think most of the time you will just be using it at instant speed without the addendum effect, but just the fact that it also has the ability to sometimes just give that punch through is just extra utility when it comes up. It's almost kind of like a modal. A lot of the addendum cards end up being kind of a modal in this way, but I think you'll mostly be using the instant speed version of it. But at the same time, it's a combat trick. You don't want too many of these, but it's fine to have 1 or 2 of in your deck. Next up is Bring to Trial. It's a 3 mana sorcery. Exile target creature with power 4 or greater. This is just a very good removal spell. There is a lot of, especially with like both the Simic Evolve creatures and a lot of just the big Gruul beef, there's a lot of just big creatures they want to take out. Like, obviously, and it's also an exile, so some of the like larger and Orzhov stuff, you exile them so they don't get afterlife triggers and things like that. I think if you're fighting like an Azorius player, you might sideboard it out, just because it doesn't get as much, and just if you don't see enough targets, you might take it out. But otherwise, it's like a 3 mana which is just pretty solid rate, and there are lots of big creatures in the set, so yeah, just solid removal. It's not top tier removal, but it's solid. Next up we have Civic Stalwart, which is a 4 mana 3/3, and when it enters battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. It's a 4 mana 3/3, which is fine, but it has kind of like this this charge stapled onto it, which, depending on the format, is fine. And I think if you're in an Orzhov deck, with like spirits, and you really do have that afterlife thing going, like this can be a pretty serious card, to just kind of like put that in. I wish this card was in guilds, because like the Selesnya deck would have loved like some sort of go wide payoff like this that it didn't have. But the Orzhov deck will also be happy to pick this up. But that said, again, it's in a 4-drop slot, and its body is fine, but it's nothing amazing. So I think it's a fine filler like card, and you're not embarrassed to play this. In the Azorius deck, not as much, just because they're not going wide as much. They're more just kind of like general tempo. But that said, this can push through some damage if you wanted. Next up is a Concordia Pegasus, which is a 2-mana 1/3 flyer. And I honestly think this is real solid. I mean, the 2-mana 1/3 flyer, which gets in, but it especially against with all these spirits going around, where it can just, having these 1/3 flyers is a real, just like, 1/3 flyer is a solid body on its own, but then with that utility against the Orzhov and the Afterlife tokens, it becomes that much better. And I feel like Afterlife and Riot are, I think, they're the two strongest mechanics in the set. And just stemming the bleeding from Afterlife is very important. So, yeah, I like Concordia Pegasus quite a bit. 2-drops are important. Yeah, it's limited. It attacks still decently. Next up is Exposed to Daylight, which is a 3-mana instant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Scry 1. I mean, it's obviously a sideboard card. Like, you need to know that you have targets you want to hit. There are lots of enchantments in the format, where I could see this potentially becoming main boardable, depending on how the meta shapes up, but for right now, most of them aren't super great, even though there are a lot of enchantments and stuff. That said, I mean, it's fine to put it, like, it's just a fine sideboard card, and as it comes to, like, naturalized effects, this isn't a terrible one. So, but yeah, otherwise, it's just a naturalized effect. Forbidding Spirit, which is a 1 white for 3/3. Okay, 3-mana 3/3. I'm already in. Like, that's just solid stats. When it enters the battlefield, until your next turn, creatures can attack you or a planeswalk you control, unless your controller plays 2 for each of those creatures. So it's a 3-mana 3/3 that also kind of like is this nice tempo switch if you're like racing or something, where it gives you like a 1-turn Ghostly Prison. And I think that's really cool. I mean, just good stats on top of just like a really good tempo effect. Yeah, no, this is like, it's nothing like, I think this is just a solid creature and one of the better 3-drops you can get in the set for uncommon and unsummon slot, so yeah. Hazda Officer. It's a 3-mana 3/2, and when it enters battlefield, target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. We've seen effects like this. They're fine. They're nothing amazing or special. They're just fine, and you might run a few of them in your deck. And it's a little bit better if you have like spirits and other evasive threats where like, okay, it also just like punches in some damage. But yeah, it's just fine. You're not super happy to play it, but it's also not the end of the world. Hero of Precinct 1. I'm super excited about this card for mostly EDH for my humans deck, because it's a 2-mana 2/2. 2-mana 2/2, yeah, it's valid. But whenever you cast a multicolored spell, create a 1/1 white human creature token. I've been waiting for more human tokens, and the only time we've gotten human tokens before was in Innistrad, so these are like some of the first non-Innistrad-y human tokens, and my humans deck is very, very happy about that. And I was thinking about actually like stripping back humans to just being like Celestia humans, but this one makes me like, no, keep the multicolor stuff going. But that's it. Also, just in the set, it's real good. Like, it's a Ravnica set. You're gonna be playing a fair amount of like multicolor cards, and if you just play like 1 or 2 whatchamacallits, even if you just play 1 like multicolored card after this comes down, you've got a 2-mana 2 plus a 1/1, and that's just really good value and limited. And anything beyond that is just icing on the cake. This is just one of the best 2-drop creatures in the set. It's just really good. Also, humans. We have human tokens. This is amazing, and I love it. Oh. I have no opinions on the modern humans, because I don't play that. I don't play modern, so I don't have any opinions on that, but my EDH humans deck is so happy. Next up is Impassioned Orator, which is a 2-mana 2/2. Whenever another creature enters battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. And it's a 2-mana 2/2, which with a really relevant upside ability, like life gain itself isn't great, but when it comes on a bear, I actually rather like this. Like, obviously you'll be playing other creatures, and yeah, no, I just think this is a real solid guy. You'll be willing to play, like, and especially if they stack really well. It's commons. It's realistically that you'll get more of them, and just kind of like for this Azorius tempo deck, it's really good on because it wants to just get that tempo going. But also for Orzhov, just because when if your afterlife creature explodes into a bunch of tokens, also getting life off of that. Just that incremental advantage is really nice on otherwise still just a real solid body as a 2-mana 2/2. Justicar's Portal. It's a 2-mana instant. Exile target creature you control, then return that card into the battlefield under its owner's control. It gains first strike until end of turn. Yeah, no, it's a blink effect. That said, there aren't actually that many useful ETB effects. Like, the idea is, like, oh, you blink something, it comes back to the battlefield, and then you get to ambush something with first strike. So it's kind of like a weird combat trick, but it doesn't work for, only works on the defensive, and there just aren't that many good ETB effects, which makes me not really like this. It's just, it turns into a weird, like, obviously you can blink something out of the way of, like, a removal spell, but it's just really weird, and I don't think this is good in this set. Like, yeah, no, sorry, Justicar's Portal. You're just not enough. Knight of Sorrows. This is our first Afterlife card. It is a 5-mana 3/3 that can block an additional creature each combat with Afterlife 1. Afterlife 1. So when it dies, it makes a 1/1 white and black spirit token. I don't think this is very good. Like, blocking an additional creature is situationally useful, but usually is not enough to warrant really terrible stats. Like, even with Afterlife, you're getting 4 mana, 4/4 for 5 mana of stats. That requires one of them to die to get the other one. And that's just bad stats. You want more out of your 5 drops, and this is just not good. And especially this late in the game, this thing's going to be completely irrelevant on the board compared to like a lot of the Gruul and Simic creatures. And yeah, it's just going to be very much outclassed. Next is Lumbering Battlement, which is a 5-mana 4/5 of Vigilance. And when it enters the battlefield, exile any number of other non-token creatures you control until it leaves the battlefield. It gets +2/+2 for each card exiled with it. I really like this card. It's this really interesting where you exile all your stuff, you get to go in there, you get this like really big creature with Vigilance that gets to pound in every turn. And if they remove it, even if they exile it, you get all those creatures back. So it's not one of those situations where like, oh, if they exile it, you don't get those creatures anymore. Like, obviously you can't do token creatures, but yeah, no, this is just real. This can be like a real threat, like, and you don't lose, like, yes, you, like, obviously you may not, like, even if you exile nothing, a 5-mana 4/5 Vigilance is, I don't mind running that creature. And the fact that it can just be even bigger, like, obviously against, like, a go-wide, like, Orzhov deck, you might not want to, like, pick up your creatures, or if they just have so many chunk blockers that you'd rather just have a wider board, obviously. If you're playing against, like, a Simic or a Gruul player with, like, just lots of big stuff, and you just need a bigger thing to match it, that, like, a lot of the other, like, white decks don't have, this becomes real solid. So, I really like Lumbering Battlement. Next is Ministrant of Obligation, which is a 3-mana 2/1 with Afterlife 2. So overall, it's 4/3 worth of stats, 2 of which are with flying. And, well, man, it is a 3-mana 2/1. The fact that it blows up into 2 spirits, which there are go-wide payoffs, especially the Afterlife cards of more than one, are just really good. And, yeah, no, I think this is real solid. You'll trade it for an X2, then get 2 power in the air, and you'll get your money's worth out of it. I think this is just a real solid 3-drop. Next up is Prowling Caracal, which is a 2-mana with 3/1. I mean, I love myself a good kitty, but this kitty is not very good. I'm not a fan of 3/1s, even 3/1s for 2. It's just, especially with the number of like X1 spirits and other things like that, and just other big stuff. There's lots of like, it's way too fragile. So not big on the Prowling Caracal. Next up is Rally to Battle, which is a 4-mana 1/3. It's a 4-mana instant which gives your creatures +1/+3 until end of turn. Untap them. So obviously it's kind of the idea. It's a I go wide, like okay, I go in with all my guys. Blocks happen, I untap them and kind of blow out a lot of your attacks and stuff like that. I mean, if you have like the go wide pieces, like lots of afterlife cards and things like that, as a one-of kind of like finisher piece, this isn't bad, but yeah, it's fine. I'm not going out of my way for things like this. I wish it gave a little bit more power boost, but yeah. Next is Resolute Watchdog, which is a 1 white for a 1/3 defender. You pay 1 and sacrifice it to give target creature indestructible until end of turn. I don't like, this is no Dauntless Bodyguard from Dominaria. Like the fact that you have to pay 1, it's a defender, it doesn't attack. Honestly, on the ground, a 1/3 I don't think is that useful in the set. At first glance, I mean, it is 1 mana, but I don't think Resolute Watchdog is really amazing. I think he's fine, but nothing insane. Right. Next up is Sentinels Mark, which is a 2-mana flash enchant creature, which gives +1/+2 in vigilance. And it has an amendum where if you cast Interest Battlefield, if you cast it during your main phase, it also gives the enchanted creature a lifelink till end of turn. So it's one of those things where if you just want to suit up a creature and get in a hit and have a life point soon, you can. But the fact that it can also be a combat trick that like just stays around, I actually quite like that. And I think most of the time you'll be using this as a combat trick rather than as a kind of like get the life point swing. But at the same time, like I think both modes are fine, and I'm not huge on like enchantments just because the risk of enchantments, but the fact that this is mostly just taking the slot of a combat trick makes me like it a lot more. Next we have Sky Tether, which is a 1 white for enchant creature, which gives the creature Defender, and it loses flying. So it's a removal spell, but obviously it's a conditional removal spell. It just gives it Defender, so if it's like a big rule creature, you're not getting through it on the ground still. But for kind of like both like the Azorius and the Orzhov decks, like I could see really wanting this because the Orzhov decks just goes with your spirits in the air and things like that. The Azorius have ways of like, they have some flyers and some other evasive threats, but you really do need those evasive threats to make you want to run it. Because it's like if your plan is through the ground, it's obviously this isn't a great removal spell, but if you do have them, this just becomes a very like not a premium removal spell, but just a very good one. Next up is Smothering Tithe, which is a 4-mana enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may play 2. If the player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token with sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color. I think I'm really excited for this card in EDH, but I think Unlimited, this card just isn't good. Like, by the time you're paying 4 mana for enchantment that doesn't affect the board state. By that point, you're already kind of like up there on the mana costs, and you don't want to be relying on this to cast some huge card you have in your hand necessarily, and I think it just comes down too late to really be relevant. Like, sure, your opponent's almost like when it comes down, sure, you might get a few treasures, you might like bring about your 6-drop a bit sooner, but then like game, your opponents will just pay for it every turn because it won't matter, and then it just becomes a card you spent and are getting nothing from. That if you're this aggressive deck that wants to be like utilizing this treasure to bring about a big creature, you're better off just playing a 4-drop creature. So not a fan of Smothering Tithe. Next up is Spirit of the Spires, which is a 4-mana 2/4 flying, and other creatures you control flying get +0/+1. I mean, I don't mind this as just a 2/4 flying for 4, and you know, since it has incidental upside for like spirits you might have, yeah, I don't mind this at all. Yeah, I mean, mostly I want it for a 4-mana 2/4, but yeah, and it has situational benefits, like +0/+1 is a lot worse than +1/+0, but what do you do? Next we have Summary Judgment, which is a 2-mana instant, which deals 3 damage to target tapped creature. And if you cast it during your main phase, it deals 5 damage to that creature instead. So it's kind of like a weird, like a lot of the standard like Gideon's Reproach types effects, but I mean, you can, it's something that attack, you can do it in combat if you need to, and otherwise I think it's just a fine, like, common, cheap white removal. Like, it's nothing amazing, but I think it's real solid. That said, I think a lot of the time we'll have trouble though, because there are a lot of the big, like, a lot of the small creatures in the set are like afterlife creatures which blow up into tokens and stuff, or they're go white stuff, or they're just big things that necessarily 3 damage won't do to in combat and you'll have to wait for the second life. So I could see this not being amazing, but you still use these kind of like effects anyway, because they're still useful to have. Next we have Syndicate Messenger, which is a 4-mana 2/3 with 2/3 flyer with Afterlife 1. I mean, overall it's 3/4 in the air, and well, I don't mind this at all. I find it interesting that like a lot of the Orzhov deck seems to be postured best to fight a lot of the Orzhov flyers, but yeah, no, but flyers I feel will be very important in this deck, especially with this as of any indication of like how many flyers we've seen. Next we have 10th District Veteran, which is a 3-mana 2/3 with Vigilance, and whenever it attacks, you may untap another target creature you control. So with the 2/3 Vigilance, that gives someone else Vigilance. And you know, it's nothing amazing, but it's fine. I'm happy to run this as like a 3-drop, but I mean, it's nothing insane. Not what else to say. Next we have Tithe Taker, which is a 2-mana 2/1. During your turn, spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast, and abilities your opponents activate cost 1 more to activate, unless they're mana abilities. And it has active Afterlife 1. I mean, that first clause is sometimes relevant, but it isn't the main part of it. For the most part, it's a 2-mana 2/1 that also has Afterlife 1, and that's a fine 2-drop. White really has like so far in white, and like this is a common thing for white, white is seeming to have a lot of really good 2 and 3 drops, but its top end is a little bit lacking, but that's often the case for white, I find, but yeah. Next up we have Twilight Panther, which is a 1-mana 1/2, but you can play black to give it Death Touch on return. Okay, this is one where if you don't have black and you can't activate its ability, this card is terrible. If you can activate its Death Touch, it's fine. It's like, it's having to leave up a mana for like your Typhoid Rats is a problem. And even then, I'm not super huge on this. Like, it's okay, but it's nothing amazing. I'm sorry, Kitty, but you're just not that great. I mean, that said, Death Touch is important because a lot of big rule and summon creatures rule. It's probably one of White's best ways to deal with it. I don't like it, but I can see it being good against like those decks. Next we have Unbreakable Formation, which is a 3-mana instant. Creatures you control get indestructible end of turn. And amend them, if you cast a spell during your main phase, put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures and they gain vigilance until end of turn. So in a lot of ways this feels almost kind of like a Song of Freyalise, where kind of like the third step of Song of Freyalise, which you gave everything gave +1 counter and give them vigilance, indestructible, and trample without having to wait 2 turns for Song of Freyalise. And Song of Freyalise was really good. Like, Reed said, doesn't give the ramp that Song of Freyalise does, but for any sort of like both, like, it can be a 3-mana like blowout for your, like, if on an attack, or protect your bomb from a removal spell, or just like a really great alpha strike that doesn't have to kill them but can like do a lot of damage. So yeah, no, I actually quite like Unbreakable Formation as kind of like a go wide finisher, and even not the go wide decks, I don't mind this either. Next up we have Watchful Giant, which is a 6-mana 3/6, which comes with enters battlefield a 1/1 white human. You know, I don't mind this. Like, it's 6 mana for 4/7 of stats across 2 creatures, and yeah, I think it's just real solid. It also makes a human token, and I'm so excited the human tokens are back. But yeah, no, it's just, I mean, it's nothing insane. Like, there are probably better 6-drops can be running, especially in the multicolored cards, but I mean, as stats go, like, this is not a bad guy, and a 3/6 does block most things. So, and what was it, like, it's not like Wishcoin Grab, which was like a 4-drop and block was very relevant in guilds for Ravnica, but I can see Watchful Giant being real solid in that point too. Alright, we're on to blue. We have Arrestor's Abnomation, I think that's right, which is a 3-mana instant, return target creature to its owner's hand. With Mendem, if you cast this during your main phase, draw a card. I mean, 3 mana, return target creature to its owner's hand is kind of expensive. If you cast it during your main phase, which is a downside, because oftentimes you want to do this like at the end of their turn or things like that, draw a card, is actually isn't too bad. Like, I like this card. Like, obviously it isn't as good against like things like Rule and stuff, but this is like can be a blowout against Cynic, where like they've poured a lot of mana into their stuff and things like that. And you know what, like, the fact that it's like, if it was 3 mana sorcery, draw a card creature hand and draw a card, I'm fine with that card. And the fact that it also has the option to, I lose a card, but I also just sometimes need that effect, I don't mind this. I don't think it's as good as like a lot of these kind of modal cards like Blink of an Eye, but I like my balance effects. Okay, we have Benthic Biomancer, which is 1 blue for a 1/1. This is a Simic card with Adapt. Adapt is a mechanic which you can pay a cost, and if it has no counters on it, you put a counter on it. So as long as it doesn't have any counters on it, it gets counters on it. And some cards can remove counters, there's a few that do that, but for the most part it's kind of like a one-time thing. So, but this one has 1 blue for Adapt 1. So you play this turn 1, turn 2, you put a counter on it, and it becomes a 2/2. And whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put in Benthic Biomancer, draw a card, then discard a card. Actually, I don't mind this. Like, even if it's like turn 1, Benthic Biomancer, turn 2, adapt it, swing for 2, also get to loot. That just seems like a solid play sequence. And if you have any way of taking the counters off or putting more counters on, just getting to loot on there too, I quite like that. Chillbringer. It's a 5-mana 3/3 flyer, and when it enters the battlefield, tap target opponent a creature an opponent controls. It does not tap during its next untap step. So it's a Frostlynx, but on a 5-mana 3/3 flyer. I mean, 5-mana 3/3 flyer is a bit expensive, like, for it to be 4 mana, but it's not the worst. Like, it is important because, as we saw in white, there's a lot of flyers in this set. But also the fact that it just kind of like taps something down, which is something that like the Azorius tempo decks like doesn't mind, and also just having these evasive creatures, because there are Simic cards that just puts counters on it for more, and having those like creatures with like relevant keywords to like pump up is nice. But I think it's fine. I think you could be running better 5-drops, but it's not a terrible 5-drop. You're not embarrassed to run this 5-drop. Clear the Mind, which is 3 mana, sorcery, for target player shuffles their graveyard into their library, draw a card. I don't think this isn't good. Like, there isn't a graveyard theme. Like, unlike guilds where it's like you could potentially like want to shuffle your graveyard into your library if like, or your opponents, if they had like undergrowth stuff or something, I don't know. But that said, that's not a relevant effect in this format. So I'm gonna go, no, you don't want to play this. Even though that it cycles itself, you don't care. Don't play this card. Next we have Code of Constraint, which is a 3 mana instant, which is target creature gets -4/-0 until end of turn, draw a card. And if you cast it during your main phase, tap that creature, and it does not untap during its controller's next untap step. I like both of these modes, kind of like, as like, it's like a befuddle, so which is fine for a combat trick, and the fact that it replaces itself means it has like a pretty like high like floor, and sometimes you also just want to like get it out of the way and kind of push through damage, which seems also solid because you also get the draw card and things like that. So yeah, I like Code of Constraint quite a bit. Next we have Coral Commando, which is a 3 mana 3/2 vanilla creature. I'm not huge on this. It just doesn't do anything, and especially if like 3 drops off, it's gonna get outclassed very quickly. It's not like you have Boros running around where you want just like these just solid creatures to like trade if they're mentor creatures and things like that. Like, this will just get outclassed very quickly. It just doesn't do enough. Next we have Essence Capture, which is a blue for an instant. Counter target creature spell. Play +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control. It's Essence Scatter! Except it's not. It's Essence Capture, and it costs 2 double blue instead of blue colorless, but I really like this card. Because I love Essence Scatter, but I mean, the double blue is a bit of a downside, but I mean, with Guild Gates and stuff, mana is a bit better. And a lot of the cards that care about, like, there's a lot of Syndicate cards which care about, like, putting +1/+1 counters on a creature, which obviously it doesn't play well with Adapt, where, like, if you haven't adapted it yet, then you can't adapt it if you put a counter on it. But then if you really care about adapting it, you just don't put a counter on it, because you don't have to put a counter on this one. But, yeah, no, I just really like Essence Capture. It's a real cool effect. Also, it's an Essence Scatter, which, I mean, Essence Scatter is usually a good card in Limited. Next up we have Eyes Everywhere, which is a 3 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Exchange control, and you pay 5 and a blue to exchange control of Eyes Everywhere and target non-land permanent. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. Okay, would I pay 3 mana for an enchantment that says at the beginning of my upkeep, scry 1? Maybe? Not, probably not. No, I wouldn't. I love my enchantments that don't affect the board state, but I have limits. And, that's not bad, but it's not great either. Like, in the long game, it will help you, but it's nothing great. You never want to activate this ability if your opponent is running blue, though. Because it's just one of those things where it's like, you don't want to be in a situation where you're swapping back and forth, and that just isn't a good situation. And I think it's weird, and I think you could potentially play this if your opponent isn't playing blue. If your opponent is playing blue, or like playing green and can produce blue mana somehow, it's unplayable. Like, I just don't think this is good. You're paying 9 mana total to swap controls of a creature. It's just too much, and they also get something relevant out of it, and the Scribe one is whatever. So I think Eyes Everywhere is just not a good card for Limited. Next we have Fairy Duelist, which is a 2 mana 1/2 flash flying, and when it enters battlefield, target creature opponent controls gets -2/-0 until end of turn. I really like this card. It's also one that you really have to like watch out for because it's great. It's like it's a combat trick that also leaves behind a 1/2 flyer with flash. And like 1/2 flyer, if it was just 1/2 flash flying, I'd be into that with like spirit tokens and things like that. And the fact that you also get a combat trick out of that is just real good. This is an amazing 2-drop. Next up we have Gateway Sneak, which is a 3-mana 1/3. Whenever a gate enters the battlefield under control, Gateway Sneak cannot be blocked this turn. Whenever it deals damage to a player, draw a card. I mean, obviously it's best like if you can pick up a lot of gates and you're playing that gate deck, but I mean, even if you only have a few gates in your deck, like I think this is real solid. Like if it's on the battlefield, it kind of turns any gate you draw into draw a card, also to cycle itself. I like this a lot more than Guild Summit, even though it actually serves kind of a similar role in that way, but it's also, what if Guild Summit didn't have the really annoying clause to draw cards upon enter the battlefield, and was also on 3 body, and I quite like that. So yeah, I actually rather like Gateway Sneak. It gives you, it's a good like payoff for having like more gates and things like that. So yeah. I will say though, because there are more gate payoffs in this set, the gates deck will be slightly harder to make work, just because it's more of a draw, and like the gates deck only really kind of works when like you're the only kind of like gates player at the table in a lot of ways to get that critical mass of gates to be like to make them very good cards. So a lot of like gate cards, it's like, would this card be fine if I only had like 2 to 3 gates? And you know, I don't mind Gateway Sneak with only 2 to 3 gates. Next we have Humongous, which is a 5-mana 2/5 with hexproof. I just don't think, like, hexproof is good on a creature you have to remove, and that's a good threat. This creature is not a big threat, and there aren't really that many good like auras that like will make it a threat or something like that. Like it's not like Dominaria where you can like put a non-Sarah's Wings or a dub on it, and all of a sudden this becomes like this huge problem. And this is just it's not great. It's not great stats for a 5-drop, and I just don't think this is a good card, even though it references flip. And yeah, I'm not big on it. Next we have Mass Manipulation, which is awesome art, but it's XX, blue, 4 blue, gain control of X target creatures and or planeswalkers. Okay, if we ignored how much blue that required, this would be a very good card. Because like, at the base level, 6 mana, gain control of target creature is great. 8 mana, gain control of 2 creatures, that's game ending in a lot of ways. But the quadruple blue honestly I think kills this card, where I just don't think it's if you're in the dream situation where you have enough fixing to like get to that number amount of blue, I could see it being potential. But that said, it's too far away from being in the realm. It's just way too hard to cast. I think a lot of the time it's for every situation, for every time that you get to like do that awesome like 8 mana gain control of 2 of the creatures, there'll be 2 times where you're sitting that there with like 3 or blue and waiting to draw your 4th blue to be able to cast this card. I just think the quadruple blue kind of kills it from a limited standpoint. Okay, we got Mesmerizing Benthid, which is a 5-mana 4/5 octopus. When it enters battlefield, create 2/0/2 blue illusion creature tokens. Whenever a creature this creature blocks a creature, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Mesmerizing Benthid has hexproof as long as you control an illusion. Okay, it's a 5-mana 4/5, solid. That also comes with 2/2s. If that was it, I'd be fine with that. Like, it's like, the 4/5 for 5 isn't bad, but also just having some extra blockers isn't bad, and that's cool. And also, just, you know, like, when I was talking about, like, that blink card, like, things like this, which have very solid into the battlefield effects, if you have like 2 to 3 of them, I think that one blink card, which I said like no to, becomes playable a little bit. And the fact that also those illusions, like, you usually use them to chump block or something, but the fact that it also ices things down and is really nice, and the fact that it also has hexproof as long as any of those illusions are still around, makes me just really like this card. It's just good value. It's nothing insane. I don't think it's like a bomb or something, but it's just real good. Next we have Persistent Petitioners, which is a 2-mana 1/3. May 1 tap it to have target player put the top card of their library into their graveyard. You may tap 4 of advisors you control to put target player puts the top 12 cards of their graveyard into the library into the graveyard. A deck may have any number of cards named Persistent Petitioners. It's a weird version of Rat Colony that is not good and limited. This set does not have enough support for mill, and by the time if you manage to even get enough advisors, by the time you have 4 advisors out, you're probably dead because you've been playing 2-mana 1/3s. Yeah, I'm just not huge on this. It's not good enough. Like, it on its own is terrible. If you add in, even if you get 4 advisors, like, you're still gonna need a couple shots to kill your opponent, so yeah. Next we have Precognitive Perception, which is a 5-mana instant for draw 3 cards. If you cast this during your main phase, instead scry 3, then draw 3 cards. I think most of the time you'll want to cast this during your main phase, and then it's just real great. But if you need to like hold up a counter or something, the fact that you can is just that flexibility, but most of the time you're going to want to just cast this during your main phase, but otherwise it's just one of the best draw spells in the format, so there's not much to say. It's kind of like just standard like for 5-mana draw spell, but the fact that also you can get that Scry 3 stapled onto it, and most of these spells are usually at sorcery speed anyway, I just really like this. Next we have Prying Eyes, which is a 6-mana instant to draw 4 cards, then discard 2 cards. I mean, for a common draw spell, I don't mind this. I mean, it's instant speed, it's 6 mana. Overall, you draw 2, but you get a fair amount of selection from it, which makes it, I quite like this. Like, usually I'll discard just pitch 2 lands, or just stuff that isn't relevant on the board, and like, obviously you don't want to run more than 1, maybe 2, but yeah. It will dig you quite deep for an answer or threat or whatever you need. Next up we have Petromander, which is a 1-mana 1/1 flying with 7 and a blue for adapt 4. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each instant or sorcery in your graveyard. So it's a 1-mana 1/1 flyer that can eventually become a 5/5 flyer if you put 8 mana into it. But in limited, you're not running that many instant sorcery spells, where I think at most you'll get like reduce its cost by like 2 or 3, and it eventually, so you pay like 5 or 6 mana to like turn this into a 5/5 flyer, which isn't bad, but like I don't think it's anything insane or amazing. I think it's just fine. Yeah, it's just. Actually, no, I think it's better than that, because I mean, if you just need a 1/1, it's there and it's fine. Like a 1/1 flyer will get in some damage, but it's not super relevant. And the fact that late game it does turn into like a really real threat makes me like it a bit more. Yeah, I changed my mind. I think this is fine, and I think I don't think it's good, but it'll be like a stable card that you're not upset to have in your deck. Next we have Quench, which is 1 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. I mean, I think it's not terrible, but it's no syncopate. It doesn't, like, once you get to the late game, it's just terrible. And yeah, I think it's one thing you need to be aware of. But that said, I think it's fine. It's not terrible to run 1 or 2, but I don't think it's anything super amazing. Sage's Rose Savant. It's a 2-mana 1/2/1. When it enters battlefield, scry 2. I'm not huge on 2-mana 2/1s, but scry 2 is almost draw a card, and you know, I don't mind that. Okay, Senate Courier, which is a 3-mana 1/4 with flying, and you may pay 1 and a white to have it gain Vigilance till end of turn. 3-mana 1/4 flying is nothing amazing, but I don't mind it. And the fact that sometimes you can give it Vigilance, like, you don't need to be in white to make it, like, passable. And if you're in white, sometimes you'll pay that mana if you, like, need to block spirits or something. But, yeah, I think it's a fine 3 drop. Shimmer of Possibility. This is a 2-mana sorcery. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put 1 of them into your hand, and the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. Yeah. It's kind of like an impulse effect, and I think it'll be fine. It's not instant speed, so it's not like as good. I don't think it's as good as Anticipate, but I mean, you'll be willing to run this. It's not something you want a lot of in your decks, but it's not bad. It's not bad card selection. Okay, next we have Skatewing Spy, which is a 4-mana 2/3 with 6 mana to adapt 2, so it turns into a 2/5 or 4/5. But each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has flying. Which, if you're in the Simic deck and you have like a lot of these like +1/+1 counter enablers, like this is one of the really good Simic payoffs, because all of that turns a lot of these your big threats into these big flying threats. And yeah, no, this is real solid. Its stats alone, it's a 4-mana 2/3, which isn't great. But 2 turns later, it turns into a 4/5 flyer, and that is quite solid. And I think you do need some like a critical mass of adapt cards and things that have counters on it to make it like, because if you don't have those, then it's just not great. But as long as you're in that Simic deck, like you don't want this card in like your Azorius deck, but in that Simic deck, this is just very nice and one of the better payoffs. Not rare. Next we have Skitter Eel, which is a 4-mana 3/3 with 2 and a blue for adapt 2. I mean, it comes down as a 4-mana 3/3, which is fine, but then 5 mana it turns into a 5/5. I mean, it has counters for things that care about counters, and you know, it's nothing amazing, but it's a solid like curve filler for Simic. Next we have Slimebind, which is 1 blue for a flash enchant creature. Enchant creature gets -4/-0. This kind of falls into the category of like combat tricks that just stay around, and that's mostly what's useful. It's useful as a combat trick that stays around, and you know, I don't mind this. Yeah. I mean, usually I think oftentimes they'll use it to like, okay, -4/-0. I block a creature, you kill it, it goes to the yard anyway, but I mean, you can also just kind of disable a creature that you're not in combat with, or like a flyer that's been troublesome or something like that, but yeah. It is similar to the one that gives things Defender, where you, like, if you're using this as removal, it doesn't really work as well as removal unless you have those evasive threats, so yeah. Sphinx of Foresight. It's a 4-mana 4/4 flyer. 4-mana 4/4 flyer I'm already in. Like, that's already just a very good card. I mean, a 4-mana 4/4 is a very good card. Add flying. Ooh, I like that. And you may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, scry 3 at the beginning of your first upkeep. Very nice. And at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. I mean, I was sold at 4-mana 4/4 flyer, and all that is upside, and there's not much else to say after that. It's just a very, very potent card. That's that, like, and also just because like a 4/4 flyer is bigger than most of the flyers you can see, because we've been seeing a lot of flyers. But yeah, I think it'll definitely be one of those things where it's like, if you do not have defenses against flyers in the set, you will die. So like when we get, especially when we get to green and stuff, it'll be a format where it's like any sort of plummet type effects will be easily mainboardable in this format. Swirling Torrent, which is a 6-mana sorcery for put target creature on top of its owner's library, or return target creature to its owner's hand. I don't think this isn't a good card. Like, the fact that it's a sorcery kills it. If it was an instant, I'd be more interested, but the fact that it's a more expensive Totally Lost, it just makes me, which it itself is only an okay card. Yeah, no, just the fact that it's sorcery speed just kills this card. I think this card is just outright unplayable. Thought Collapse, which is a 3-mana instant counter target spell. Its controller puts the top 3 cards of their library into the graveyard. It's these 3-mana counter spells usually are more playable in sealed, which they're not bad in sealed, but in draft and stuff, it's just not playable. Like, I want my secondary effect to be relevant, like with the in Guild of Ravnica, the one that surveilled was actually nice because surveil was like part of a card and things like that, and it synergized with other things. You're not milling your opponent out in this format. Verity Circle. It is a 3-mana enchantment with whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped. If it isn't becoming declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. And you pay 5 mana to tap target creature without flying. That first effect, most of the time, will not be relevant. Like, the main thing that will affect will be, like, guild mages. But that said, like, if you're in kind of like that slow, grindy game, like, this is a removal spell. Granted, it is very expensive to activate, but it's not the end of the world. Like, I could see if this format is slow enough, this could be very good. And obviously, if your opponent has things like guild mages and things like that, it becomes real solid. But I think most of the time it'll just be too slow and too mana intensive for a lot of decks. Wall of Lost Thoughts, which is a 2-mana 0/4 with Defender. When Wall of Lost Thoughts enters battlefield, target player takes the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard. This is unplayable. Don't play this card. I wouldn't play a 2-mana 0/4 Defender. So is Kaladesh Limited, because then it had Artifact Energies, it also had Reach. Also, I think it was an 0/3. Okay, ignore what I just said. But, it's just not playable. It's just, Defenders for the most part, you don't want to play, and this one is really bad. Windstorm Drake. This is a 5-mana 3/3 flyer. And other creatures you control flying get +1/+0. The best place for this card is splashing for it in an Orzhov deck, where you give all your spirits +1/+0, but that said, I mean, it's a 3-mana, it's a 5-mana 3/3, which is fine. It's nothing amazing. But if you have any other flyers, this becomes real solid, and especially if you have any Afterlife cards, even if you're just an Azorius and playing like white, to like get have some instant Afterlife cards, but like if you're Azorius and you pick up some, or if you're Orzhov, pick up some Azorius Guild Gates and like get to go like just slam this down, and all of a sudden all your 1/1 flyers are now 2/1 flyers, which is a big difference. Yeah, no, I quite like Windstorm Drake in that deck. But yeah, and that is it for white and blue, and for my Guilds of Ravnica set review. If you disagree with like anything I said, like I want to get better at this format too, and yeah, I'm really excited for the set. Lots of good like commander stuff that also isn't really is not relevant in limited, but yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time for black and red. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful night's sleep, and may your story smile upon you.